Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to another episode of the Saturdays and Stores podcast, which you can find right here on the Court Store Media Network. I'm your host, Kanaye, and what a run it was for the Huskies. Unfortunately, they did fall short on Monday night in the national championship against Michigan. However, I don't think you can call this season a failure. You always want to bring back a championship, yes, but when you consider just how hard this team fought, how hard they played, how they gave Michigan the biggest test of any team in this year's tournament field, it's something that I'm going to come away and remember for a long, long time. One of the more improbable runs that I've seen to get to a national championship game in, all the years I've watched college basketball. It's up there with some of the best runs I've seen just to be able to get to that title game. And I'm going to have a lot of memories from this season. And on today's episode, I'll obviously talk a little bit about just the game itself, but that won't be the bulk of the video as it normally is when I am in season recording these episodes. A lot of it's kind of just going to be an overall season recap and just a quick preview for what to expect going into this next season of Husky basketball. But before we do that, just a couple quick messages. First, us here at the Court Store, we partner with Phorm Energy to tell you about all the great products they have to offer. Whether you're someone who needs to stay energized, someone who's an active gym goer, Phorm has the products that you need. If you're interested in seeing what they have to offer, I'll be plugging the link to their full website in our description box below. And as always, just engage with the content on the channel in any way you can. Liking, subscribing, telling others about us really goes a long way with getting more people to see what we put out. So let's get into it and just start with the game itself. UConn lost 69-63 against the Michigan Wolverines. And as I mentioned, Michigan has really just been the juggernaut of the sport this year. They completely blew through the NCAA tournament field up until this national championship game against UConn. And I think you have to give the players, Dan Hurley and his staff, a lot of credit. They employed a defensive game plan, and I think to their credit, it worked. Michigan probably had their worst shooting game of the season. They only made 2 threes. And yes, those 2 threes were backbreakers in the second half, which came from Elliot Cadeau and Trey McKinney, respectively. But I think that UConn's defense, as they normally have this entire season, put them in a position to be able to win a game. And really, just a lot of the issues relating to this team's offensive faults came back to light in this game. And I think a lot of those deficiencies were masked just by, again, how magical and improbable this run that they went on to get to this game was. And I think that kind of made a lot of people, maybe including myself, I'd be lying if I said that, kind of pushed some of that to the side or to the back of my head, just with how poorly they've shot the basketball the entire year, just how crazy this run was. I just think, again, the shooters didn't make shots. You saw Alex Caravan go 3 for 10 from 3. Braylon Mullins goes 3 for 10 from 3. Solo Ball actually had back-to-back games where he went 3 for 7 from beyond the arc between the Illinois Final Four game and this title game against Michigan. But I think it was very clear Silas Demery, not 100%, really just couldn't give you any off-the-dribble creation the way he was doing at points of the year. Obviously, I think you still looked for him to do a little bit more. But the foul trouble was one thing. He couldn't stay on the floor. Terrace dealt with some foul trouble. Yes, there were calls that obviously didn't go UConn's way that probably should have. But I don't think you can completely point to the officiating as to why UConn lost this game. UConn had their opportunities offensively, and they honestly just really didn't execute all too well on that end of the floor down the stretch. And that's not a spite to the players nor the staff. That's just Michigan is a really, really tough team. I thought UConn got really good looks to shoot, and I think they were deterred by the length, the athleticism, and the size that Michigan has. Michigan is, one of the biggest teams you'll find across the sport, between Yaxel Lendeborg, Naimara, Merez Johnson in the front court. Namari Burnett's a solid guy to guard people out on the perimeter. What they have coming off the bench, Roddy Gale Jr., he's a great guy doing that too. It's tough. It's similar to what we saw out of UConn's struggles against St. John's in the first half of Duke. This size and athleticism out on the perimeter really forces UConn to feel uncomfortable when they're shooting these shots, even when they do look good on TV. So I just think a lot of that is attributed to really Michigan's roster construction, the just size at every spot, athleticism at every spot. It's tough to score against that. And Michigan was, of course, being so, was a top 5 defensive team in the country this year. I think they might have been the best defense in the country per KenPom on the last day of the season. Alex Caravan led the Huskies in scoring on Monday night with 17 points. And I know he didn't make as many threes as he probably would have liked to, but he left it all out there. He played so hard. Both him and Terrace going for double-digit rebounds each. Harris going for 14 and AK going for 11. These guys fought. They left it all out there. Your 2 senior leaders, and I'm going to miss seeing them suit up for the Huskies next year. I can't believe we're going to be living in a world going to this next season that Alex Caravan won't be stepping out onto the floor in STORRS in Hartford for another season with the Huskies. And man, he's just going to be so tough to replace. One is a locker room presence, Maybe he wasn't ever the vocal leader that you wanted him to be, like a Cam or an Andre, but he still led by example. And I mean, the epitome of what was a great teammate, the epitome of what is a great winner. He's got to be looked at as the best winner in the modern era of college basketball. And I don't think I can hear a legitimate argument for anyone else for that title. Is Alex Karaban the best player in program history? I would probably lean towards no, but is he the most decorated player? I would say yeah. Yeah, just when you consider what he's done in a 4-year span, where he could have left the program twice to go pro and play in the NBA and turned down what probably was a decent, partially guaranteed two-way deal following his second championship in his sophomore season, to come back and just play with so much pride for his school and for his teammates, his coaching staff. You just don't find guys like that across college basketball anymore. And it's so rare now. You think back to the stat that he's only one of 22 or 23 seniors to have a senior day with the school that they started with. And for Karaban to be one of those 22 or 23, that just shows you how special of a player he is and how Dan Hurley said himself, he's probably never going to get to coach another guy like AK ever again. So I just saw from the Saturdays in Stores podcast, want to give Alex Karaban another massive, massive thank you for everything he's done for the program. Just the 2 national championships, 3 Final Fours, the leadership, the toughness, the energy he brought. That's something that you're not going to be able to replace both off the court and on the floor. Just the versatility at the 4 spot, being able to space the floor, pull bigs out of the paint, knock down threes, those dagger transition threes from deep that really were his signature shot. Going to miss seeing those when UConn goes on runs. But to get to the other senior, Terrace Reed, I told Josh this prior to recording this past Monday on our national championship recap. Terrace Reed made himself so much money during this tournament run. This is one of the more dominant big men runs that I've seen in NCAA tournament history. I mean, immediately back to Zach Edey, those numbers that Terrace put up this year are very, very similar. And man, just to knock down free throw after free throw when it mattered with your collegiate career on the line, to be able to get to a national championship game and carry a team the way Terrace did this NCAA tournament run, I'll never forget just the dominance that he was in the low post. Really, again, kind of going back to what I've been saying on this podcast the last couple of episodes now, the Sonogo-esque footwork. And I don't know that I've ever seen a player in college basketball develop so much between here. That was one of the things we pointed to going into this season that I covered the entire offseason is Terrace going to develop above the shoulders? The talent is there physically. Yes, we all know that, but he has mental lapses sometimes. Sometimes wasn't always in the right spot last year. Didn't make the right play. Maybe committed a bad foul. Didn't turn over the right shoulder when trying to score. And those things, I mean, he improved so drastically in all of those areas that he made himself legitimately, you could argue, the best player in this NCAA tournament. And that's incredible. And to consider Terrace the face of what was this NCAA tournament run, I just think it's so special. It's a complete display of just the work he's put in, the mental toughness he had to, one, choose to come to UConn from Michigan in the first place, and 2, after having a tough season that probably didn't go the way even he wanted it to go last season, and to come back, not transfer, stick it out with Hurley, embrace the tough love that Hurley shows his guys, and be as productive as he was this year. First team Big East selection, East Region Most Outstanding Player, all tournament team. It's so incredible. I'm so happy for Terrace, and he's going to find a role for himself in the NBA. We're seeing a shift back towards the traditional big men having roles. Again, going back to Zach Edey, he's a guy that's carved out a role for himself and went in the lottery. Now, I don't think Terrace is going to go in the first round, but I think he could go as early as, a top 40 pick. It's going to be tough to say exactly where he might land, but I firmly believe Terrace is going to carve out a role for himself in the NBA and play a long, long time. So big thank you from the Saturdays in Stores pod to Terrace Reed. Really going to miss seeing T Grizzly, Kodiak, Bear, Terrace suiting up in a Husky uniform. And obviously the last senior, Malachi. Malachi was one of the better backup point guards that you were going to find across college basketball this season. He played with energy, brought some of that New York guard swagger with him, the toughness on the defensive end of the floor. Obviously, just the 9 dimes against Florida, against Illinois. I think he had 9 dimes against Texas as well. Incredible passer, core vision on display. I still remember that Euro he hit against Florida in transition in the Jimmy V Classic and how that got me out of my seat. So, a lot of fun memories with Mally, throwing the bank shot, went plus the foul against Illinois on Black Friday. One that me and Josh were both in attendance for. That was a great, great moment. And obviously really going to miss Mally. He's going to be a tough guy to replace in the portal, I would assume, this offseason. Obviously more stuff on the portal come towards the end of this episode, but going to miss Mally and going to miss Alec Malender, Dwayne Caroma, I want to throw those guys some love too. Dwayne obviously played some stretches earlier in the year, needing to have some relief appearances for Terrace Reed while he was hurt, obviously coming off the bench for Big Eric. And, Big Eric's a point of discussion later on as well. And Alec Melender, man, just one of the better locker room presences that you're going to find. And just a guy that's really so likable. And, man, that huge and one he had against Furman, I won't forget that. And just to really not play all too much during the season, to come in the NCAA tournament in the first round and play big minutes when Silas Demery was out, and he obviously had to come in for Malachi when Malachi needed breathers. That's just big time stuff from Malik, and it was very, very nice to have him in STORRS for a season, for both those guys, I should say. But I guess to talk about just how I view this season overall, in this 4-year run that UConn's gone on under Dan Hurley, the 2 championships, the second round exit to Florida last year, now the loss in the title game, this might be my favorite of the 4 seasons. I just think that what made me fall in love with this team is, yes, maybe they didn't live up to the expectations that we had for what this team could be at their complete peak and ceiling going into the season on paper. No, they didn't really meet those expectations, especially on the offensive end of the floor. I thought, deep down, I really believed that once everything kind of clicked at what I hoped was going to be the middle point of the season, this team would be a top 5 offense on KenPom. And it just never got that way. And I think a lot of that is the shooters didn't make shots. A lot of that is injury stuff. Solo ball, I don't think we're being told nearly enough about what he dealt with this year with the left wrist, his shooting hand. And I think that took a major toll on his shooting percentages this year. And that's why we saw them dip so far down from where they were last year at 41%. And it's very clear, I think that took a toll on his confidence shooting the ball too. And I think Solo Ball, that's a guy you got to get back. I don't care what anyone says. I've heard some UConn fans say that they wouldn't mind if Solo left the program. No, this is a guy you got to bring back. He's part of that, some people call it the Fab Five class of 2023 with Castle, Ross, Stewie, and Sangare. And you got to keep him around, man. He's been starting for 2 straight years. He knows the system. I really believe that once Solo Ball gets back and fully healthy, he's going to get back to being the shooter we know he can be at 40+%. I think he's going to improve as more of a creator next season, which we kind of hoped he was going to be this year. And I think he's going to look to become more of a playmaker and get his teammates the ball in their spots. So get Solo back. I don't want to hear any conversations around Solo not being brought back to the program, because I think that's probably where the staff is looking in terms of that they want him back. I would be very, very shocked if I heard any news regarding Hurley and the staff not wanting Solo back for his senior season. Braylon Mullins now. He obviously dealt with some injury stuff this year too. The ankle injury in the preseason, the concussion against Nova and Hartford. I think that ankle injury before the year started really took a toll on the explosiveness that he was supposed to be advertised as coming into STORRS with. I don't think we got to see him with that jumping ability and going to the basket the way he did in high school. And granted, he is playing against college competition. He did play against college competition this year. But I do think that ankle is definitely something that really probably took a toll on what he could have been as a more complete player. I think if he comes back to school, we're going to see Braylon's shooting percentages go up to where I expected them to be this year, at close to the 40% mark. He only shot around 30 this year. But man, he hit some big shots. And man, he gave me one of my favorite moments watching college basketball and hitting what was arguably the biggest shot in UConn history to take down Duke. Another reason why this might honestly be my favorite of the last 4 seasons for UConn. But he's got some big decisions to make. The NBA is obviously looming. Got to see where he kind of stacks up on some more mock drafts to come. Right now, I've heard lottery, obviously following that shot against Duke and his performance against Illinois in the Final Four in his hometown. He moved up pretty high in the mock drafts. I've seen him go as high as 12. I've seen him go as high as maybe 11. But there's going to be a lot of conversations around that. Dan Hurley went on a talk show just earlier today, I believe, or maybe it was last night, where he said that, yeah, he's still has yet to have the conversation with Braylon and his family, but he's going to ask him, do you like college? Because some guys are obviously want to kind of get to the pros as quickly as possible. Someone like a Steph Castle obviously didn't really need to be in school for all too long. And he was NBA ready the day he walked into STORRS. But, Dan's probably, he said in the interview that he's going to tell Braylon's family, listen, do you like college? Because if you do, it might be worth coming back, because we could probably pay you more at UConn than what you could probably make as the 15th pick in the draft. And I think a lot of that is because of the Liam McNeely situation that kind of went down last year, where I still don't think Liam should have dropped as far as he did in last year's draft class. But nonetheless, there was definitely a spot for him to come back, to run it back one more year in STORRS for his sophomore season. And I personally felt he probably should have. He obviously didn't. Ended up being a first round picnic regardless. And, he's done well in the G League. But I think a one more year would have definitely benefited Liam. And I think Hurley probably doesn't want to have that same thing happen again with Braylon, where you don't want to send guys out of your program to the NBA before really believe they're ready. So again, a lot of it's going to come down to what Braylon wants, what his family wants. And I don't think there's necessarily a bad decision he could go with here. If he goes to the NBA, that's fine. He should do really well in the NBA. I mean, he's what NBA teams want. A lengthy wing with size who can obviously shoot the ball, get up and down the floor, has some athleticism to him, has some toughness to him. I think he'll do fine in the NBA. But I do think one more year in STORRS would benefit him. And when you consider that next year's draft class, which is the 2027 one, it won't be as strong as this year's. And I think Braylon, there's still a full world of possibility for him to run it back for one more year and still end up as a top 14 lottery pick in the 2027 NBA draft. So again, a lot of it's up to him. He knows the staff, Dan, they know how to advise him much, much better than I do. And whatever decision Braylon decides to end up going with, as a fan, I'll support him no matter what. So, again, if this is it for Braylon and STORRS, thank you again for taking down the Duke Blue Devils, because, man, that honestly made my year seeing them lose in that fashion. What a year it was for Braylon. Now, in terms of Jaden Ross, Jalen Stewart, these two are really interesting cases because I feel their roles going into this next season are very up in the air. A lot of it's going to be pending on how Hurley and the staff wants to approach the roster construction for next year. Are they going to look to recruit over these guys once more and add some portal acquisitions? Because in that case, then I feel that there's a strong chance both Stewart and Ross might choose to decide to hit the portal. These are two guys I would like to have back next year. However, it's tough to fault them if they know that they're probably good enough to be starting at a lot of Power 5 schools and be making more money than they probably are making right now at UConn. And if they get recruited over for the third year in a row, it's, again, tough to fault both those guys for wanting to put their name in the portal and find a new home. So this is kind of like a wait it out and see type of thing. I think Jaden obviously really emerged this year as being that 3-and-D guy that I've been so vocal about me believing he can be on this podcast for 2 years. And I've obviously had to deal with people in the comments telling me that I'm crazy for believing in J. Ross. But this year he backed me up and showed it. He knocked down big three after big three in the early stretches of non-conference schedule in the Big East tournament and NCAA tournament. So great seeing Jaden do that. Obviously, what he's done on the defensive end of the floor in his entire duration of his years in STORRS so far has really impressed me, and I'm sure everyone else who watches UConn basketball. Jalen Stewart, I don't think it's fair to judge Stewie off this season alone. I think when there was so much role fluctuation for him, where he was starting at the beginning of the year because Braylon Mullins was hurt, to when Mullins came back, he's now coming off the bench. He had to deal with injuries. I just don't think it's a fair assessment of who Stewie is as a player. I really do believe that he's a major, major scoring threat when he's on the floor. 3-level guy, can take you off the dribble, create his own shot. And obviously when he turns it up, kicks it into high gear, he's a great, great defender. We saw what he did to Eric Dixon when he was with Villanova last year. So I think Stewie's the guy you want back now. If Hurley decides to, again, re-recruit over these guys once more and get some stars out of the portal, are these guys want to accept a bench role for their senior seasons last year of eligibility? I don't know, and I would probably lean towards both of them saying no to that. So again, I'm not all too sure. I also do kind of wonder how this team stacks up with the national landscape going into the preseason, if they are kind of both in that starting lineup argument for this next season. So that's definitely going to be something that's a conversation for a later date once we find out more. But again, I would like to have both Stewie and Ross back. But I do think there's definitely some help you're going to need to go out and get in the transfer portal. Now, before we get to the portal and the guys who have already entered and some other stuff, well, let's talk about what UConn is officially bringing in for sure right now between the two freshmen, Junior County and Colvin Landrew. Now, Junior County, I believe, was Gatorade Player of the Year in Idaho or Utah. I forget off the top of my head where he is from. He's probably a guy that's going to be coming off the bench next year, playing in a limited role. I would think he's seen a situation similar to what Solo, J. Ross, and Stewie saw in year one in STORRS. I don't think he's a guy that's planning on being one and done. Someone that you're probably going to have closer to 2 or 3 years on campus at UConn. So I think that's a good developmental piece, someone who's going to build towards the future of this program. It's definitely great to have that. Some guys that can, come into that winning culture early and carry it into the next year. Colvin Landry's a guy who I do think has first round NBA upside following his freshman season. Well, once that completely plays out, he's the Gatorade Player of the Year in Georgia. He's obviously drawn the Steph Castle comparisons because of that. They also play very similar play style wise. And they're both physical on the wing. They both can take it to the rim. They're very tenacious when going up and attacking the basket. They can get up and punch one on a couple guys. They both defend at a high level. I do think that the one fault with both of them coming into STORRS was, the jump shot. We kind of got to see if Colvin's going to be able to knock down consistently. I have heard that he's improved a lot as a shooter from his junior senior season, but I think this is a guy that's going to be able to contend for a starting spot, potentially filling the AK role next year. He's obviously going to be battling Jalen and Jaden for those minutes if both those guys do return. So I'm really excited for these two freshmen. Obviously, you never know what could happen with late freshman ads, as we saw Liam McNeely 2 years ago, where he was added back in late April, May. So again, we'll kind of have to see what happens with that. But in terms of guys with UConn right now who have entered the portal, it's two. It's Eric Reibe and Rezon Elise. Eric really, really shocked me. Eric was supposed to be the guy manning down the paint at center this next season. And I don't know what transpired to lead Eric to make this decision, but nonetheless, I'm always going to support a Husky even when they are no longer with the program. So, Eric had a strong start to the season. That out-of-conference play, Hurley said it. He saved UConn's early part of their season. And obviously, I don't know if it was a matter of him just not playing as much as he was at the beginning. Maybe that dealt some blows to his confidence. I know he'd struggled with some foul trouble later in the year and struggled against tougher, bigger teams. And I'm not really all too sure what kind of led Eric to ultimately deciding to transfer. But nonetheless, he gave us some good moments this year. Again, going back to the non-conference scheduling. So wish Eric the best of luck. Definitely a big shocker. I honestly don't think this transfer portal class is very strong at the center spot. So I do really wonder who UConn goes out and tries to pluck out of the portal this offseason. I'm going to be making a video highlighting some transfer portal targets I think UConn is in contact with and some others that I think they should look to get in contact with. That'll either be coming up on the same day you guys are seeing this or maybe the day after on like a Sunday or earlier in the week. So definitely be on the lookout for that. But those are going to be it's a big role to fill. UConn's obviously going to need to get two bigs out of the portal now because, of course, you lose Rezon, who's probably was going to be at least, at minimum your third string center, and the way it was looking, the second string centers. You got to get two centers in the portal now. You got to get someone, whether it's Jalen or Jaden, Colvin, or a portal guy to fill the Alex Caravan role. I am under the assumption Silas Demery Jr. will be back for his senior season. That's a guy I forgot to touch on earlier in this episode. As far as I know, I saw a couple interviews where he was saying there's nowhere else he'd want to be. I don't think an NBA thing is really a real possibility for him following this season right now. I think it will be if he comes back for his senior year, but I would expect Silas to be back running point and the show next year in STORRS once more. And I do think that next year we're going to see Silas really make that Tristan Newton leap. I think Silas this year was definitely still hesitant even following that Providence game. I know me and a lot of other people talked about how we felt he really turned the corner following that 23-15 performance he had in Friartown to beat Providence in overtime. But I just think a lot of it was him still kind of trying to figure out what to do and when, whether to be aggressive, whether to be a playmaker for his teammates. I think over this offseason, if he does come back, he's going to be able to fully develop into becoming that second-year Tristan Newton version of a UConn point guard that this program's obviously going to really need next year if they want to be able to make it back to another Final Four and win a national championship this time, unlike this year. I totally believe Silas can do it. I wouldn't want any other guy returning to run the show for the Huskies next year, and I do hope he does return because I have a lot of faith that he can be an All-American level player, maybe first-team guy like we saw Tinu do in his grad year. But you definitely got to get some bench depth in the portal. You kind of got to wait and see what Braylon does with his NBA decision. That might be carried out over a longer process like we saw with Caravan. I don't think Braylon, if he returns to college, would really ever consider the transfer portal. Solo's obviously going to be up in the air. I would assume he comes back. I mean, the guy's got tats of UConn on his legs, so I wouldn't think he enters his name into the portal. And I would expect him to be a Husky for his senior season too. But, there's obviously a lot of holes that UConn's got to fill in this transfer portal now following the loss of Eric Reibe, Rezon Elise, and the guys who are losing to professional basketball between Malachi, Terrace, AK, and some obvious bench pieces like Dwayne and Alec. So got some holes to fill, but I wouldn't trust any staff more than this one to be able to identify the right guys in the portal and fill those holes as need be, and ultimately put together a team that's going to be good enough to go and chase number 7 next season. So, I mean, I think that's going to take care of everything that I had for you guys today. Just what a great season overall. I again want to bring up the point of how spoiled we are as UConn fans watching this program under Dan Hurley. 2 championships, gave the eventual national champion Florida run for their money, the best test of any team in that tournament that year. And then this year to go on this improbable run when just a lot of people, including myself, didn't really know that they were going to even get out of the first weekend, to beat Duke in the fashion they beat them in. What was probably the biggest shot in the NCAA tournament since Chris Jenkins with Nova in 2016, maybe Jalen Suggs with Gonzaga. Playing a Final Four your third in 4 years. It was special. It was a great watch this year, and a season that, again, I'm never going to forget. So it was a hell of a run on this podcast this year. I will be obviously doing a lot of stuff with this in the offseason, covering portal moves, covering portal targets, covering my expectations for next season, how I think everything is going to play out. So definitely be on the lookout for that. Thank you guys for sticking with me for 2 seasons now of the Saturdays in Stores podcast. If you stuck around to the end, please engage with this video or anything else you see on the channel because it really does help. But until the next episode, I'll see you all next time.